Hey there! Today I get to talk to you about our new robot overlords coming to a table near you. Really though, it's Sentinel time, and I am pumped for what that means for the game. My name is Nate, and welcome to the Gamers Guild. The Sentinels are finally coming to Marvel Crisis Protocol, and they are probably one of the most greatly anticipated releases for the game for a few reasons. One, they are only behind Magneto as far as iconic foes of the X-Men go. Two, they are extremely nostalgic thanks to the 90s X-Men cartoon. And three, they are really big, to the point that the Prime is now the tallest miniature released by AMG to date. And not by a little bit either. I mean, take a look. Dormammu's head flames come up to the Prime's shoulder. And those three reasons combined are what excites me as an advocate for the game. Because in the same way as someone being able to spot a Hulk on the table and express interest in the game, having giant icons of the X-Men franchise on the map will draw eyes both at your LGS, but even at conventions in a way that Dormammu and Malekith won't. Sure, Malekith has an absolutely metal sculpt that looks awesome, and people will at least know who Dormammu is thanks to the Doctor Strange movies when you're asked about it, but the Sentinels are going to fill the eye-grabbing space better than probably any other model ever will from a distance. But that's not why you are here, so let's get into some details on these characters. First, I'm going to be covering both the regular Mark IV Sentinels and then the Prime version, but because there are a lot of similarities, I won't be doing a full read-through of each card, and as usual, I will save the leadership ability until the end of the video. The Sentinel Mark IV has the alter ego of Sentinel Mark IV. They have 3 physical defense and 4 energy and mystic defense, backed up by 7 stamina. A short move though on a 65mm base, so they move about medium for a normal size base, and are size 5 for just 4 threat. Their first attack is an Energy Plasma Blast. It has a range of 3, strength of 4 for no cost, kinda. First of all, the attack is a builder, so you will gain power equal to the damage dealt. However, when you are at the pay power cost step of the attack, a Sentinel may spend up to 3 additional power. And for each power spent, you add a dice to the attack roll. So this can be a builder that costs 3 for 7 dice, which really is not an awful option, but obviously a 4-die builder on a 4 threat on its own isn't all that impressive. The Robot Spender is a physical suppression protocols, has a range of 3 with a strength of 8 for just 3 power. On a wild, the attack gains suppression. After the attack is resolved, for each wild in the attack roll, the defender gains one of 3 special conditions. Shock, Slow, or Incinerate. 3 of the most powerful conditions in the game, in my opinion. The Sentinels Attacks are interesting because you can either spend 3 power for a 7-die energy attack with a decent chance of building some power back, or 3 power for an 8-die physical attack that has pretty good odds of at least putting out 1 nasty status condition. And really it becomes a good question to ask of the different ways that power can be spent on the Sentinels. And speaking of, for the Mark IVs, there is only one other place to spend that power. Their active superpower restraint cables. It costs 2 and lets them choose an enemy character within range 4 and in line of sight. That chosen character is then pushed toward this character short. And this superpower can only be used once per turn. So a bit of a more limited webline pool like Spider-Man has, but a very nice unlimited size control option is never going to be a bad thing. From here we have 4 different innate powers. The first is the extremely unique Master Mold. It says that when you are building a roster or a squad, you may include 2 of this character instead of the normal 1, which is why I've been referring to these characters in the plural, and why the pack comes with 2 of the exact same character. We then have Power Matrix, which will give the Mark IV 2 power at the end of its activation, which is absolutely brilliant for balancing purposes while still giving these Sentinels some nice power production. We also have Sentinel programming that says that the Sentinels cannot be advanced or pushed by mystic attacks or superpowers, and when defending against mystic attacks, this character counts wilds as 2 successes instead of just the normal 1. Then finally, we have the fact that these behemoths can fly and are immune to the bleed and poison special conditions, as they should be since, robot. And they have quite a few changes on their injured side. The first thing is that their stamina drops down to 6, but that's the smallest of the changes. The Plasma Blast attack becomes a Plasma Leak, which is a completely different attack. It now only has a range of 2 and a strength of 4, still at no cost, but it's no longer a builder or even a gainer for that matter. Instead, we have the Systems Overloading, which says that when the Sentinel is rolling in dice for crits, you roll in 2 dice per crit instead of just the normal 1 for every crit in the roll. And then Systems Critical will deal 1 damage per crit in the attack roll after the attack is resolved. Also putting a further dampener on the power generation, the power matrix becomes damaged and will only generate 1 power at the end of the Mark IV's activation instead of 2. So changes that aren't really in favor of the Sentinel, but nothing as drastic as something like Green Goblin at least. So let's break down some pros and cons real quick on these giant tin cans. Their baseline stats are pretty nice for a 4 threat, a total 13 stamina with some decent defenses, with a weak point on physical, which I guess explains why Wolverine can slice through them so quickly. Another nice thing is that the size 5 combined with Sentinel programming means these guys are going to be an absolute pain to control on the board. It makes them immune to all of the bow effects and web snares out there, and most superpower throws are limited to size 4. So for like 98% of the characters, the only way to control the big boys are through attacks with control elements that don't have a size restriction, which even then is still a pretty small pool of effects. Their attacks are actually pretty good once you get into round 2, where you have the power to put some power into them, but only as long as they have 2 or 3 power to spend. A 4 threat having an activation where they only get to throw out 2 attacks with 4 dice is going to feel really bad. They also have a mostly guaranteed control with their restraint cables, and having that control available at range 4 is going to be absolutely splendid. Of course, it does mean that a target that is otherwise out of range can then get in range with a good cable yank as well. So basically, once they have some power to work with these Goliaths, they're going to be hitting at or above their weight class pretty easily, but that also means that without some power, these guys are going to be having a really rough go of it. Which is then con number 1, kind of. These are definitely some characters that I need to test a few times before I make this judgment too harshly, because their power generation feature is very new, but also very smart. By giving the Sentinels their power at the end of their activation, it means that they can't get off funky and unintended turn 1 plays, while still providing the Sentinels a really nice power base. For instance, the Mark IV should have a minimum 3 power to start off round 2, which is a fully charged Plasma Blast, but even with the extra power generation, I'm curious if on their own these robots will be able to generate enough power to do everything they want on any given turn. The other big weakness I want to point out of the big guys is that they are big. A size 5 character getting tossed into a friendly is 6 incoming damage. That's a lot of pain. Now, thankfully for the affiliation, because of the high threat count, you should be able to mitigate this by spreading out your characters across the map, and Cassandra Nova, who is also an affiliation, has a superpower that just outright ignores collisions. But any other time, it's going to leave a whole lot more than a mark on whoever the Sentinel lands on, making Indomitable and Brace for Impact almost must-have cards for your restricted slots. And that is the base model Mark IV, so what about the Deluxe version? The Prime has a few upgrades over its brothers. First is the stamina bump of a 10-8 split for a whopping total of 18 stamina, which is a really sizable pool for a 5-threat character. Both of his attacks are upgraded to the Mark II versions, which means for the Plasma Blast, the base strength goes up to 5 and a max of 8 with some power spent, and the Suppression Protocols has its strength go up to 9, along with a bump in the power cost to 4 instead of 3. The only other change on the healthy side of the card is a new superpower called Pattern Analysis. It is a reactive power with a cost of X, and it says when this character or an allied character within range 4 is attacking or defending during the modified dice step of the attack, this character may spend up to 3 power. For each power spent, this character or the allied character may reroll that many dice. So this is a wonderful support ability that we've already seen on Shuri do absolute work, and what's more is he can even use it on himself. Personally, I am a really big fan of rerolls, so much that I built an entire roster around it. So this ability really excites me, while I'm sure my opponents who I keep rerolling my way into successes are going to be less of a fan. On the Prime's injured side, his stamina does drop down to 8, and he gets to keep his Plasma Blast Mark II instead of it becoming a leaking weapon. But his power core does become an overloading one. Instead of giving 2 power at the end of an activation, it will allow the Prime to roll 5 dice during the power phase, and for each hit and crit, he gains 1 power. But if a skull or failure result pops up, he will take a point of damage. But everything else will stay the same, so all in all, when comparing the Prime to a base model, there are some nice upgrades, but I'm not sure if all the upgrades are worth an extra threat bump if you had to pick between the two as a splash character. The biggest perk upgrade is definitely the Pattern Analysis, which is really nice, but it's also just another power drain on a model that has plenty of ways to spend it as it is. So as a leader, the Prime is going to be really nice because it has the really large health pool, some reroll abilities and stuff like that, not to mention the leadership ability that's really nice. But what I'm getting at is that if you want to run a robot as a splash character, the base model will probably do you just fine, especially if you have a leadership that can feed them power. Also, if you are wanting to get the most value out of an attack and only have 3 power, you'll want to spend all of that power on the Plasma Blast up front instead of saving power for the rerolls. The more dice you roll up front, the more chances you have at landing a crit and getting more successes as a whole. But if you have an enemy who only has 1 HP left and want to try and save your power for other stuff, sure, you can save that power for the Pattern Analysis. Now, to be a little bit more fair to the Prime, Pattern Analysis isn't the only new ability on Optimus. He also comes with the leadership ability, Mutant Hunters, for the Sentinel affiliation. That is a big help to the complaint I currently carry for the Sentinels as a whole. It says, when an enemy character is dazed, after the effect is resolved, choose a number of allied characters up to the dazed character's threat value. Each chosen character gains 1 power, and a character cannot gain more than 1 power as a result of this leadership per turn. So there is a lot to love here, and yet still leaves me wanting more in some ways. This is going to be producing power on the same level of Magneto's leadership, but you don't have to build around it. Daze a 3 threat, 3 characters gain power. So if you can pull off a round 1 daze before most of your Sentinels activate, then suddenly you have up to 3 range 4 pulls to yank enemies off of objectives. I always do love myself a good power generating leadership, but there are 2 downsides to this one in particular. The first is that this isn't going to be a go-wide affiliation. The lowest core model count of 3 that will consist of a rogue agent like Winter Soldier and a base Mark IV in the Prime comes out to a whopping 12 threat. Most of the time, these Sentinels will be running at most 4 to 5 models. And while they can technically go 6 wide at 20 threat and only 20 threat, that is only because they are bringing in 2 threat characters that are out of affiliation. So dazing a big hitter like Hulk will leave power on the table. And if you daze a couple of characters in a turn, you'll have way too much to distribute. Which I guess is a good problem to have if you are complaining about dazing 2 models in a single activation. But the other downside here is that the leadership only rewards dazing a character and not the KO. It might have been too good at that level, but really once you have dazed an enemy, you usually want to follow up and KO that character if you have a reasonable chance, because it pulls an activation and a problem off of the board. Again, maybe that it was just overkill and it made bouncing back too hard for the opponent. I don't know, but Because of the natural follow-up to a daze is trying that KO, it feels odd to lose out on the synergy there. Don't get me wrong, this is still a really nice leadership ability. Handing out power is one of the more powerful effects in the game. If you look at Corvus's leadership, that whenever an enemy is dazed or KO, all other Black Order characters in your roster gain a single power. That's pretty nice, but it does cost a tactic card and it's limited to Black Order. The Sentinel Prime's Mutant Hunters doesn't cost any tactic cards, and it doesn't have a restriction on who can receive power, so it's going to be really nice to have. All in all, these characters look to be a lot of fun and still iconic, and their leadership will offset that one obvious downside, which is that power generation. But these Goliaths aren't going to be also giants of the meta or the competitive scene. They are certainly playable, but right now there is a flying kitty cat that loves to literally toss them around. Interestingly though, the leadership brought by the Prime will do really well against wide teams where it can be easy to daze a 3 threat here and there, which describes what the Sam Spam lists that are currently countering the Tiger King are doing. So maybe there is a chance that the Sentinels have some solid legs as a Splash affiliation to bring in and wipe out those lists full of easy targets. Time will tell, but regardless of meta, I'm really excited to build, paint, and play with these robots while playing some Terminator music in the background. Here at the end of the video, I want to give shoutouts to the guild sponsors, Tritex Games and War Room Hobbies, which are both local gaming stores that host game nights, events, and the like, as well as offering MCP miniatures at a bit of a discount. If you shop from them, use the code TritexGGCP5 at checkout when shopping with Tritex to save an extra 5% off, and the code MCP2022 will get you an extra 10% off of your order from War Room. So, if you want to get your hands on our new Overlords, or just get your World War II lineup set up, and you're shopping online anyways, consider using these stores and discounts to help out an LGS. However, if you are already shopping from a local gaming store, do that. That's awesome. Keep supporting them. They're what holds up a lot of this community in the first place. But if you are still wanting a way to support the guild's videos or podcast, check out our Patreon page. It isn't anything too crazy, but it gives you access to the Guildhall Discord and helps us to continue to work on new projects. On that note, thank you to all the members of the Guildhall who are supporting what we do here. After some delays because of poor Wi-Fi, I have now run an Ethernet cord under my crawl space, put unnecessary holes in my walls, drilled through 18 inches of cement, and have some fantastic connection in what I guess is the studio. So in the next week or so, I hope to start testing the streams, and then next week we will also be releasing 2 videos and a podcast. Before I forget, we do also have a monthly giveaway thanks to the wonderful guys over at Tritex. All you need to do to enter is be subscribed to the channel and leave a comment on a video the same month that video was released. As always, if you have enjoyed my thoughts and are new to the channel, hit the subscribe button for a weekly dose of MCP content in the form of reviews, battle reports, and other MCP goodness. As well, you can find the Gamers Guild podcast on several different podcast apps and platforms. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, keep on gaming.